Congresswoman Maxine Waters is a Democrat from California. And Congresswoman, there's been a story that Kelly is a sort of restraining force, that people should be happy that he's there if they're worried about the president's temperament or worried about the president's current condition, and that it's good to have him there. Is that your opinion?
My opinion is it won't last for long. This president will not get along with him for very long. This president has the kind of disposition that will cause him to confront, argue with, fight with, shout at those people around him, and they're only going to take it for so long. If you notice what Kelly was saying, he was not fired today. He was not leaving today. And I don't know if he was qualifying that or not, but I think that was instructive, that even he knows it can't last very much longer.
At some point, Kelly said something about the views of Democrats on security and what he called open borders. And I wanted to play that for you and get your response to it, because he was characterizing the immigration views of folks like yourself and members of your party. Take a listen.
All right.
I believe that honest men and women can disagree on anything politically or otherwise. The one thing I draw a little bit of a line to is on the security of the nation. There are certainly people in our country that have the opinion that that open borders or near open borders are fine. People should be able to come and go. There are others, myself included. You can bet the president. But I think the majority of Americans feel as though security on the borders is important.
Do you think that's open borders is an accurate characterization of a large view of folks in Washington, for instance, on immigration? Oh,
absolutely not. And if he's truly concerned about security, he should be concerned about the way that the president is goading with the North Korea situation. He and Kim Jong-un are basically talking to each other in ways that Corker has said could lead us into Third World War. And so if he's really concerned about security, he should be concerned about whether or not this president is going to continue the kind of talking and goading that he's doing that will cause this Kim Jong-un, who we consider to be unstable, to launch a very devastating missile into our country with perhaps a nuclear warhead.
There's a reporting indicating that the president, the decision which we're expecting forthcoming tomorrow, in which he decertifies the Iran deal, that was essentially born of a kind of fit of pique. The president was angry that he felt cornered, that the experts had come to him and told him, no, they're actually complying with the terms of the deal. We should certify it because that's the truth of the matter. And then the Washington Post reporting, he threw a fit. He was furious, really furious. It's clear he felt jammed. And that's why the White House Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, and others divided this plan to kick it to Congress. What do you make of that? What are the consequences of making policy on something like this in this fashion?
Well, it's just unseemly that the President of the United States would be making policy on his own. He's being advised by everybody, Republicans and Democrats, that he should not be undoing the Iran deal. We have other nations, 6 other nations, that are involved with us in this deal. And so for him to have America look as if it wants to undo the deal, if he wanted to decertify them, he basically is saying he knows better than anybody. But of course, during the campaign, he said he knows more than the generals. He really believes that, and it's dangerous. And for members of Congress to sit back and watch what he's doing and watch the damage that he's doing in this country, and to watch him just guide us into a possible war and not speak up because they're concerned about their reelection is not responsible. I believe it is time for Republicans, especially, to walk over to the White House and tell him enough is enough. As a matter of fact, I think he should be impeached.
Yeah, Al Green was going to introduce a resolution yesterday. I was going to ask you if you would vote for impeachment, just knowing what you know now. But when you say Republicans going over and say enough is enough, what do you mean by that tangibly?
Well, what I mean is Republicans should step up to the plate and confront the fact that this president appears to be unstable, that he appears to be taking us into war, that he has openly obstructed justice in front of our face, and that increasingly we're finding that there are more and more lies about the connection with Russia. I believe that there really has been collusion, and I do think that our special counsel, Mueller, is going to connect those dots. But I think there's enough now that we all know and we all see and we all understand that we should be moving on impeachment.
All right, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, always a pleasure.